This is live training from Unity Technologies. My name is Adam Buckner. I'm one of the trainers here at Unity, and tonight's session is going to be Animate Anything with Mecanim. It's going to be an introduction to Mecanim and an introduction to non-character animation. We're not going to be looking at character animation today because I sort of want to show some of the other things that Mecanim can do. What I find when talking to people about Mecanim is that most people identify this as a very powerful tool for animating characters, especially biped characters. And I think that many people lose the fact that you can use Mecanim to animate pretty much any public variable, any public value that you have in your game. So you can use the Mecanim state machine to do that. Let's take a look at what Mecanim is. Mecanim is a state machine. And every state plays one or more animations, and we can blend between these animations within a state, and then the states have transitions between them where the animations are blended. So let's just quickly take a look at a character. I've got a prefab here. This prefab is named Ethan. Let me just pop him in, and then I'm going to bring him to the center. Boop. There we go. And let's get a light on him. Let's make a directional light. There we go. Doing fine. And then pull him towards us on the Z here. There we go. Anyway, so we got a character. So there's our character. Frame selected on him, I guess. So we have a good rotation. And if we're going to look at Mecanim, I'm going to go ahead and open up the Animator window. I just want to do a quick overview of some of the things about Mecanim. So we can bring up the Animator window. And Mecanim is a state machine. And so we have our game, we have our objects, they have particular states, and we can have animations on each one of these particular states. So if we take a look at idle, we'll have our idle animation, and we can test that animation. We can have our sneak animation, so when our character is sneaking, we can do that. And then we can have multiple animations that are being blended together when in a state using a blend tree. And so if we want to see this in action, we can play our character here. Let me go back out to the main machine. And so as we move, oh, come on, Ethan, please. There we go. We can see that it's running our idle. And then as we move, we can see that it's moving in our locomotion. I don't have sneak set up for this particular one. And then when we're doing our locomotion, we look inside it, we can see that we're blending between these two states. So this is, how the basic character animation is going to be working, where we've got animations attached to states, and then we have our transitions between these states where we can blend our animations. But what I'd like to do is take a look at animating something other than a character. I want to talk about animating, in this case we're going to animate a door, and then we're also going to animate some lights. There's some required elements for dealing with Mecanim. We're going to need on our object, every object that is going to be animated is going to need an animator component. That animator component is simply added by doing our add component, and we'll do this when we get into the full demo. So we have our animator component. The other thing we need is we need an animator controller, and that animator controller is what we're seeing here in the animator window, and that contains all of our states and all of our transitions. And then what we put into the animator controller are our animation clips. And our animation clips can come from a number of different places. We can have imported animation clips, and our imported animation clips can be keyframed animation, say from a 3D package. You're dealing with Maya or Max or Blender, and you do keyframe animation. Or imported clips can also come from motion capture libraries. And so we can steal motion capture libraries, and we can apply those animation clips to our character. So we can get our motion capture libraries from an external source. But we can also animate curves that we create inside Unity, which is primarily what I'm going to be showing today. If we want to take a look at animated clips that come in, if we take a look at Ethan, I'm going to select the main model. So, boop. Model, character Ethan. And so he's going to have, he should have his animations attached here. I guess he doesn't. So let me just find it this way. Going to our animation, pick our idle. What are they attached to? Humanoid idle. So we've got our animation clips attached here. Under our animations, we have our imported animations. These are from, these must not have been keyframed to the model. They must have come in as motion capture separately. So then these are our animation clips that have been imported. And again, we can test those in the editor. the character dying, character idle. So if we want to add our animation clips, if we have animation clips that we've brought in, you can simply drag them into the animator window when you have your animator controller selected. And then you can make transitions between these. Again, I don't want to go into great detail, but I do want to show you the basic idea so you can make your transitions between your animation states. And so here we have added two animations. We've added transitions to and from these two states. And then these states are connected with these transitions. The animation states are blended during the transition, and the parameter values that control these change of state are sent from the scripts that we write for our game. So let's go ahead and start a new scene. I'm going to come out of here, so we're in our scene. Let's do a new scene. And the project that I'm using today is Stealth, and you can get Stealth from the Asset Store. Asset Store, again, is Command 9. Window Command 9 for the Asset Store. Control 9 on Windows. And then in the Asset Store, we can go ahead and search for Stealth, and then we can download all of the assets. Now, just to warn you, I've done a couple of sneaky modifications to some of the things in here so that they work well for the demo. Not very big, but if you try to follow exactly step for step, you may find there are some slightly small changes with what I'm doing. And again, you can find Stealth by simply looking for Stealth or looking for Unity Technologies material that we have. And so there's the Stealth project up here, and that's what I have downloaded in my project right now. So I'm going to throw in some geometry. So let me come down to some prefabs, and I'm going to throw in prefabs down here so they've been pre-built. I'm going to grab my environment, take a second to load in. And so there's my environment. Let me back out so you can see that. And then let's drop in our lights. Search. So we've got some lights there, so we can see what's going on. And let me zoom in a little bit so we can come in and come down here. This is what we're going to be looking at down at this door. We're going to build a little door here. And zoom in, please. Anyway, and then let's go ahead and add Ethan, who's our main character. There we go. Ethan is in. Frame selected. Where is he ending up? Let's move him to that 17 that I had before. Let's revert him to the prefab. Revert to prefab. Thank you. And frame selected. There we go. So I want to make a door, and I want to animate it. So I'm going to go ahead and put a door into this gap behind Ethan, and I'm going to go ahead and animate that door. I'm going to move him over a little bit. I was guessing that that's 6. Let's get him out of the way. So down to about maybe 3, because he's going to be in our trigger zone, because we're going to make a trigger for that door. So I'm going to make a door. I'm going to add the door in, and then I want to create an animator controller, populate that controller, add some animations, and then trigger that animation when Ethan walks through it. So essentially what we're going to try to do is make a door with a motion sensor on it so that when Ethan walks into the proximity of the door goes ahead and animates itself to be open. So let's go ahead and grab a model. So I'm going to grab something called sliding door, or door generic slide. So let's bring that in. So there's our door generic slide. And then I'm going to move that to view, which you can do by going to Assets, Game Object, Move to View. Pop. Come on, there you go. Fantastic. Something's cooperating today. I'm going to put that down to 0 so that it lands on the ground. And then I'm going to rotate that by 90 degrees so that it's facing along with our wall. And now let's go ahead and push that into place. I think about 16. Say minus 16 there. Minus 16, yep. And then about 6 looks like about 6 or 7. 7 looks good. Let's frame selected on that door again so we can see it a little bit better. Go into top-down view. Let's just give that a little bit of a nudge so that it's in the middle. That looks good. Now let's just set that by numbers. 95. Perfect. So we've got our door set up now. But we need to make some animations, and it comes. This door was animated, so we've got some animations for this door already. If we look at the model, we can see that it has an open and closed position. So this model was keyframe animated. So let's go ahead and select that door. And the first thing we need is an animator, and it comes in automatically. So that animator, it has seen that there's animations attached to this model, and it is included in animator. So now the next thing we need to do is create an animation controller. So I'm going to put that into my done folder. I've made a little empty done folder here with nothing in it. So let's go ahead and create an animator controller. Now the animator controller is an asset, and that asset resides in our project folder. So let's go ahead and call this door controller. Sounds good to me. Door controller. So there's an animator controller. We're going to call it door controller. I'm going to store it here in my done folder. And then let's go ahead and associate it with that generic door slide. I'm going to make that something a little bit more understandable. Let's just call this sliding door. Oh, how about only 1 O? 2 O's. Good morning. Sliding door. Crackers. I should just go back to bed, obviously. So anyway, so there's our sliding door. It's called sliding door. Let's put the door controller onto our controller slot. And there's our controller slot. And so now we've got an animator controller associated with it. So let's go ahead and look at our animator window, and we can find that if it's not open from going to Window Animator, and there's our animator window. And we can see that it only has our generic any state, and what we want are the two animation states that came with the model. So let's go down to the model. We can see there's open and closed, and let's just simply drag them into our animator. And because of the way we dragged it in, the orange indicates that that's the default state. So it is going to be in the default state of closed. And then we want to transition to open. If for some reason it was the other way around, and I can do this set as default. So if it had come through and this was orange, the open was the default state, we wouldn't want it to be that way because it'll default to that at the beginning. So we want to click on the state that we want it to be as default and make sure we set as default. So that's our default state. And then now that we have our two states, we've got the closed state and the open state, we want to make transitions between them. And then we'll control those transitions with code. So go in our closed state and then do control click, and we make a transition, and that creates attached to our cursor. And we want to attach that to the open. So now we have created a state from closed to open, and then the other way around. Sorry, click on that first, make sure it's highlighted. Control click, make a transition back from open to closed. So now we've got just our two states, open and closed. And we need to control these. If we look at the transition, we can see that there's the open animation, and then there is a transition to the closed animation. And currently it's controlled by exit time. And what we want to do is we want to control this by a script. We want to control this by a script, and a script that we're going to write. And we're going to send a value into a parameter inside the state machine to go ahead and make this transition. So we need to add a parameter, and I want to add a Boolean. That new Boolean value is just going to be simply open. And we can now control our transition. So we want to go from closed to open when this Boolean open is true. And we want to go the other way from open back to closed when that Boolean value is false. We have now set up everything we need to set up within our animator controller. We have our two states, open and closed. We have our control factor, which is that Boolean, whether it is open or not. And now we need to write a script for it. Come back to our scene and take a look at our door. There is something going on. Just attached my window. Come back here, window. And as we can see how long that's taking, yes, we've got two audio listeners in there, I know. Let's get rid of that main camera because we've got I thought we had a camera attached to Ethan. No, we have an audio listener attached to Ethan is what we have. We don't need that. So this is just the way that the original Stealth was set up. We've got an audio listener. So I'm going to remove that audio listener component. And then I've also made a prefab camera, which I want to drag in. Excuse me, I should have done this before. There's my camera character camera there. So I can get rid of my main camera, that default scene main camera. So everything I have is set up for this scene. And I'm going to go back to my tutorials wide. There we go. And go out of 2D mode. And frame selected on Ethan. So we're going to write a script, And that script is going to be based on a trigger. And we're going to need to be able to trigger opening and closing this door. So our door, our sliding door, is going to need a trigger on it. So let's go ahead and create a new physics sphere collider. And this will be our trigger. And the center of the game object's at the bottom, which is where we want it to be. And let's make the radius of this sphere collider a little bit larger. Let's make it 2. How about 2? That looks good. So that's our motion sensor there. So when we enter that trigger, that green trigger, we are going to be opening the door. And when we exit that trigger, the door is going to close. And then we need to make sure that is triggered. And the other thing I want to check is that I believe we don't have we don't want him walking through that. So let's go ahead and create a box collider around the door, because that's just a generic model, so there's no colliders on it. So now we've got a box collider around the door, so we can't walk through it, and we've got our sphere as a trigger around the outside to activate our script. So let's go ahead and create a new script. So let's create a C# script, and we're going to call it door activator, and put that in our done folder so we know where it belongs. Hello. And let's say, whoa, put that in. Yep, we did want to start you up, but I also wanted to put you away in your done folder, please. Thank you. So I'm going to remove all of the sample text, and we're going to start from scratch. What we're going to want is first as a reference, a private reference to our animator component. And so let's just call this animator. And then in awake, we need to find this. So in awake, what we're going to say is our animator is going to be equal to a get component. And that component is going to be the animator component. And don't be surprised if you get this wrong with code completion, because there's a lot of anim related stuff. We don't want animation, we want animator. So we make sure we get our get component animator. And then the two places we want this to be is we want to have an on trigger enter and an on trigger exit. So on trigger enter. And we need to detect our colliders. So we want collider other. And what we want to say is if the other game object dot tag is the same as player, and that's with a capital P, because we have Ethan is tagged as a player. Then we want to take our animator component, and then we want to set bool. And the bool we want to set is that open parameter that we made, that open parameter, and we want to set it to true. So what we've done here is, again, we've found our animator component, and then when Ethan, as the player, enters the trigger, if other game object.tag is the same as player, then we take our animator, we send it set bool, and we set the bool open to true, and that'll go ahead and open it. And the other thing we want to do is go the other way, is on trigger exit. We want to find our collider other. I'm just going to copy and paste that. And then, just cutting to the chase, that if the other.gameObject.tag is the same as player, we want to then say our animator set bool is false. So let's save this. So we now have our door activator script, and we want to just drag that onto the door. So if we look at our door, we can now see that we've got our door activator script. So now when Ethan, because we've got our character Ethan here, and he's got that capsule collider around him, we'll go through that trigger, and you can see that Ethan is tagged as the player. So let's save this, and let's save the scene. Let's save it as in our done folder. Not our done folder, our demo folder. Oh, did I call it done? Done's good enough for me. Let's call this _demo. Let's As a matter of fact, I'm going to change this from done to demo. Demo. So we keep everything consistent. So now let's save. Let me find a good spot for starting this camera. So find a good good view on Ethan, and then I'm going to take my my camera, and then I'm going to game object align with view. So let's save. Let's hit play. There we go. And he's opening the door. As we can see, that as my character runs in front of the door, then the door goes ahead and opens up. And then when we get out of the area, it goes ahead and closes again. So very simple, two simple states, a simple trigger. We send a Boolean to the state machine, and the state machine does the transition. I'm going to go ahead and come back and bring up our animator window, and you can see that the Boolean is simply taking us back and forth between these two states. Now I want to show you how to do this with our own values, with values that we set in the editor, but I will stop for a second and see if you have any questions. So if you have any specific questions as to where we are at this state, I'll go ahead and try to answer those. Unity Games R Us is correct because the state machine, you're in one state or another, but we also do allow transitions between those states. So you can be partway through if you're blending in animation. While these transfer from one to the other during our states, you can see that there is time involved. And then as the time changes, you can see the door is going to move down here. So you can see it's going from, there's our state 1, open state, there's our state 2, closed state, and there is a transition that's going on between these two states over time, and then back again. If we're looking at Ethan, we can also, I'm going to get rid of these two guys, we have our locomotion state, and that locomotion state has arguably two more states in it. It really actually has two animation clips. And as his value of speed changes, you can change between walk and run. You're blending between walk and run. You can see the weight is done on how gray it is. So you're blending between walk and run while you're in that locomotion state, depending on how fast you are moving your character. Jason Clemente, is there a way to set the blend state between two animations so no blending by default? Are you talking about quickly changing from one operation to another? Well, you don't need to have a blend. You can just simply have your blend time of 0, if that's what you're talking about, by changing from one animation state to another with no blending. And arguably, when you're solidly in any particular state, there is no blending with another state. You're simply running the animation from that state alone. Shock Media, what the main reason that the door knows when to open, if we look at the sliding door, is that Boolean that we're getting from open. So when my script, we get the on trigger enter, and when we see that the other's collider's tag is player, we send that Boolean to true, and the door opens up. And yes, we're looking up, I'm noticing there's some discussion about hashtags over string lookups. That is true. We are doing a string lookup at this case just because for the simplicity of today's demo. I didn't want to get into setting up values in another way. But you can see that if you run the stealth project and take it as a tutorial. Michael Sama, are all these pre-made animations in Unity or they have to be imported? In this particular case, the door was imported and it was keyframed with the original model and came in as part of the FBX. Now, let me show you another demo, in which case we set these values inside Unity. So let me go ahead and come back to Unity. And what I want to do is take these lights, these three lights here. See if I can pick them out without too much trouble. So I've got three lights. Let's see if I can get them. There we go. 3. And these three lights here, what I want to do is have them turned off before Ethan gets to the room. And when Ethan opens that door, the lights, like they do in office buildings, will automatically turn on and light that room. And we'll set those values inside Unity. So we've got these three lights here, actually. So let's first create a new game object on the root. And let's call this new game object Active Lights. And then let me reselect these again. So let's grab that light and that one and that one. So I've got my 3 lights here, and let's move them into our active lights. And this is just so that I can pick them out of all of the lights in the scene more than anything else. And you can see that we're losing our prefab. That's okay. And so now I've got these 3 lights, and all of them I want to animate, and what I want to animate is their intensity. So I'm going to turn off those lights. So this is going to start off with an intensity of 0. So they're turned off. And all of these are going to want an animator component, which is under miscellaneous animator, or, oops, that's not quite yet, or we can just go to add component, which is Shift Command A or Shift Control A, type in animator, pick it from the list, hit return, and we can see that it's added, and it's been added to, when we do that multi-selection editing, it's been added to all 3. So we now have an animator component on each one, but we need a new animator controller. So let's again go to our demo, and then using the create menu, let's create another animator controller, and let's call this one light activator. Light activator. So we got our door activator and our light activator. So there's our light activator. And then let's again select all 3 of these, and with multi-selection editing, I can go ahead and add that controller into all 3 of these. Now let's select just one of these lights, and I'm going to write the animation state here myself. We're going to make 2 animation states. And so to do that, we want to go to Window, and then we want to go to Animation. Not Animator, but Animation at this point. And I'm going to dock this window up there. And I'm going to need 2 curves, and I'm going to need them, and I'm going to add them to any of these lights. It doesn't make a difference which one I choose. So let's go ahead and pick the first one, and let's create a new clip. And let's call this new animation, deactivate. Deactivate lights. So that's deactivate lights. And I want to add a new curve. This is what I am animating. And I want to animate the light's intensity. And you can see that I can animate even the animator itself. The transform, I can pick any of these public values, but I want to do the light's intensity. Oops, come back here. Light's intensity, and I hit the plus button. So now I'm animating the light's intensity. And a little bit of a trick here is that we could have an active animation that's running and that's looping, like the idle that Ethan has when he's standing there. So we could have something pulsing if we wanted to. But I'm just going to very simply have one state, just that start state. And that start state is going to be that intensity of 0. And if I just leave the keyframe, I've got this default keyframe. We already had our light 0. It's just going to be set to the light, the current state. So let's create a new clip, and let's call this one active lights. When we do that, we want to add another curve again, and we're going to add our light intensity. So hit the plus there. And again, delete that errant keyframe at the end, and we're in record mode. So I want to have an intensity of 1. And you can see that this is in record mode automatically. And when I'm recording, this gets a red highlighted tint. So, and I'm only animating one light. So let me bring this to free aspect. We can see this light has turned on. We can see as I'm animating it what it's the value of the light is going to be. And 1's probably enough for what we're doing. It's a relatively low light scene, so let's leave that at 1. And we're done. We've basically created 2 states now. So come back to my scene, and I've got my active lights, which I've spelt badly, and deactivate lights. That wasn't spelt in any way that's of any value. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's just call that activate lights. Activate lights and deactivate lights. So we've got our animator controller, and if we go to our animator window, we can see that it has automatically added these. That has got the wrong name to it. I'm going to delete that one, delete that asset. If we want to put in another one, we can just drag it back. Activate lights and deactivate lights. Now deactivate lights, luckily, again, is our default state. We can see that with the orange. If the activate light was orange, you'd want to set that to our inactive or deactivated lights. And so we want transitions. So our deactivated lights, so we want one transition. We hold down the control key, we make a transition to our activated lights, and we don't need one that goes back, because for this purpose, once these lights are turned on, we're going to leave them on. We can have something else that is a timer. That means that after no one has moved around inside the room for 5 minutes, then the lights would transition back off again. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I only want one way. So we've created these values inside Unity, and we are transitioning only to turn them on. Now, what is interesting is we've set this up in this animator, and we can see now that it's true for all of them, because they're sharing the animator controller. So the work that we did on the animator controller on one is going to be the same for all of them. So now let's go ahead and turn these off. It will turn itself off. Why is that still on? That should be done. Thank you. Sorry, I left that on. So let's save this. We have to now change, we have to update our script to take into consideration these particular lights. So we need to have a list of these animators, a collection of these new animators that we've created on these lights. So let's create it'll be easiest to do this for this demonstration, to make a public animator collection, a little array, and let's just call these lights, because these are our lights. And then inside the onTrigger enter, so if our player enters the trigger, not only will we open the door, but then we will also say, for each var light in lights. So for every light in our collection of lights, we want to take our light and do a set trigger and activate. Now we're going to have to set this up. What we're going to do is we're going to activate our lights when those doors are open. So saving this and coming back to Unity, we now need to set up our transition. And our transition by default is going to be exit time. So let's add a parameter, and this parameter is going to be a trigger, and this is the trigger that we have just written called activate. Let me just make sure we have that spelled correctly. Activate. So copy and paste. Yep. So there's activate. And then our transition is going to take the condition of activate. Now with our sliding door, we now have a collection of lights, and we need to associate our lights here with it. And one way to do that is to drag each one of these into the array, but there's a little trick that I'm going to show you, which is that the little lock button up here, if I lock it, I can then select more than one item, and then I can put these in on the title, and I can get all three of those added to my script at once. Now let's go ahead and unlock that so that our inspector behaves normally. So if we look at the door again, so now we have these lights are controlled so that when Ethan crosses into the trigger, save and play. Not only does it open the door, but it turns on the lights. Now the nice thing about this particular setup is that this is reusable. So I can take this sliding door and these active lights, and I can duplicate them, and I can move them to another location. I'm just moving it to this door here. Save and play. So yes! Ha-ha! And so we can now duplicate this situation. It's using the same sets of animator controllers. It's using the same sets of animation. And whenever we go through our little motion sensor, not only does it open the door, but it turns on the light. that's the quick demo for today of trying to animate some very basic stuff in Mecanim, where we can create our own values in the animation window, and then we can animate those as states inside Mecanim. And we remember that we need to have an animator controller on our game objects, and we need animation clips. So we need an animator component on the game object. We need an animator controller asset in our project that we then use to hold our animation clips, and we define all of our transition inside those inside the transitions in the animation controller, and then we activate and deactivate those transitions based on the scripts that we write by sending parameters to that actual controller asset. So I'm going to throw it open for questions. Zorbstream asks, can the animator controller be used to create AI logic? It can be used as part of a system for creating AI logic, but not all of it can come inside the state machine. It is just a state machine, and it needs to be driven by your scripts. And there also will be some advances to how Mecanim works in 5, which will help. If we look at the blog, let me quickly bring this up. Looking at our blogs.unity. There we go. Shiny new animation features in Mecanim 5. So that's worth a read. And also, I would go ahead and read most of the blog posts that we have talking about the advances to Mecanim. But Mecanim state machine behaviors are going to be very useful when moving into 5. Poleman is asking about 4.6 beta production. When compiling to web player, there's a text on the bottom right, made with Unity beta 4.6. Can it be deleted? Not during the beta, and as a matter of fact, that's the one player platform that is relatively restricted during the beta test, because you need the beta player to be able to play web players from the beta. And so other people on the beta program will be able to play your game, but it won't be able to be distributed widely. And that note there is telling you that you can play it, other people on the beta can play it, but nobody else can. So that's more of a reminder for you that that is a beta web player. And this is purely because at this stage you need the web player to be able to, the web player plugin to be able to play your web player game, and that is in development as much as this software is. Whereas if you do a standalone or a mobile game, the platform itself isn't under development, so it will run fine. Kipye is asking, will you be able to make the transitions more structured in Unity 5.0 so that you don't need them to be pointing directly towards the state, instead have a simple UML-like approach? I believe that the current node-based approach is still what's going to be in 5.0. If you have a specific feature request, then I would suggest that you could do that in the community on feedback. There we go, that's what I was looking for, on the feedback. And you can put in a feedback request and see if that helps. Unity Games R Us, yes, I mean, as we say, we can't officially suggest that you release a final game on beta software, but on the other hand, 4.6 is fairly stable, and I know many people are certainly experimenting with it. Unity Games R Us is asking, I know that you can call a function with a new UI event system. Can you call a function by an animation curve somehow? I can't see that as an option. Yes, you can make animation events. It's not something we're going to cover today because I plan to do that on another session. But look for animation events, and you can, at certain points in your animation, call events from the animation system. So are there any more questions that someone would like to ask? Is there a way to put a delay at the end of a looping animation? Yes and no. It would really have to be built into the loop. It would be the easiest way to do it. There may be some clever people out there that can also think of some other options, like having a small moment of idle so that it goes through the loop, and then you transition to a very short idle state and then back to the loop again, so that you're transitioning by time at the end of, I'm just sort of guessing here, is that if I had the animator, I would transition by time, by exit time, to the small amount of animation that does little or nothing, and then have that exit back to the original one. And you can nest animations, so you might be able to do something clever like that. Zorbstream asks, can the animator controller be used to replace a model? Well, they're two different things. The animator controller is the logic that we use to control a model. It doesn't really replace the model, unless I misunderstand what you're asking for. Shadeless is asking, are there any plans for game architecture tutorials on the Learned site, like making managers and controllers and how to properly structure your game? Yes, there are, Shadeless. They're on our roadmap, but to be honest, they're a little bit more fragile to make because everyone's game is so unique. It's a harder project to put together to get something that is both generic and useful. We would like to get certainly some more patterns on the architecture site, but just a question of time management. And maybe with some of the new people we've hired, we can start to get more material for you up there. But yes, we're aware that game architecture is a very interesting subject and one well worth putting up, which we haven't really done yet. And it's something that isn't very well covered out in the net sphere either. So we're aware that it is a lack generally all around on how best to put together a game. Zorbstream, like dynamically transform a model. Well, anything that you can handle, if you can animate the dynamic transformation, and it has two states, you can start to blend between them. So yes, you would be able to blend between two animation states on a model, even if the mesh was completely changing. You'd have to have the animation for that mesh. Shadeless, if you find documentation that is missing or is lacking, please do write a bug report or post, at least in teaching, because it's something that we need to know about. And occasionally the documentation is very large, and some things are thinner than they should be and need to be brought to our attention. But definitely, if you find that there's a lack of documentation on some features, bring it to our attention. Tycho213 says, I have a model I added to my hierarchy, but I can't seem to be able to add new extra animations. I see only crouch, run, walk, idle, and so on. I see add new curve grade out. Well, there's two different things, Tycho213. There are animations that have come in with your models, like these characters. Where did we put that? That would be under animations. So these sort of generic humanoid dying idle, they've come in, they've been brought in probably from a motion capture library. And so we can just drag these directly into our machine, into our state machine. And these are not curves that we have created. Now, this won't work for me to try to attach a run left or run right to a door. Not quite sure what would happen. I don't think we're going to experiment today. But that's essentially us loading pre-made animations into our state machine. If we want to animate the object, we also have to create those animations and bring them in. And we would do that in the animation window if we're looking for simply setting curves. And we can see that this does have keyframes, keyframe animation, and we're looking at the keyframes. And add curve, this is grayed out. It's closed read-only because these are imported animations. This is one that came in with animations already, and it is set to read-only. So what we need to do is disassociate the model with the animations that it came with. Let's go ahead and bring in this model. Here's the generic door slide model. Bring it in again. And then we don't want any animations associated with it, but we can bring in the animations separately. So let's come back to that door generic slide, and then I'm going to duplicate both of these animations, and then I'm going to go ahead and drop that back down on top of the model. And then if we look at the animator, we can see that these are not closed, the two animations on it. If you look into, if you look into the animator, we can see that there's our open and our closed states. And if we look in the animation window, we can see that those are no longer locked, and we can go ahead and we can add curves, and they're not read-only because by duplicating those animations, we have separated them from the model, and the mesh model is being treated separately as well. So we can go ahead and add those animations back in, and it doesn't keep it locked. All right, any more questions while we're here, or shall we wrap it up? Well, let me give you a couple of places to look. First of all, don't forget, new live training. We've got some stuff coming up. Next week, I'm going to be doing coding for the absolute beginner. These are for people out there that have had no coding experience. Definitely watch this space, watch the live training page. And then specifically next week is going to be coding for the absolute beginner. And we're going to talk about everything you need to know if you know nothing about code to get you up and going. What's a variable? What's a function? How to pass in parameters. So very beginning, very startup things. If you know it, come by out of amusement. If you know someone who wants to get into game development but are intimidated by code, they feel that they don't understand code, they don't understand C#, that they can't touch it, definitely have them come by. Stop by next week, at the same time. And we'll introduce them to code, and then you can go off and you can make games together because they've learned how to code. The other thing is take a look at our teaching site. So if there's anything that you want to tell me, community please, or about this particular class, if you want some suggestions, you want to leave suggestions, you want to have criticisms, comments, anything, leave it here at the free online training thread. And then just don't forget the Learn site in general. Lots of good stuff there. Tutorials, documentation. Thanks for coming. We appreciate that. I guess we'll be here same time next week with how to learn coding for the absolute beginner. And go ahead and follow us if you'd like. Follow us at Unity3D. Follow us at Mike Geig, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ranch, which is me. And we'll go ahead and answer your questions either on Twitter or on the forum.